the similarities and that blueprint between narcissists, it doesn't matter who they are. The subtleties of their behaviors are identical.
They try to tear you down so much to where you're like, I suck. But
it's crazy making.
Terrifying. What's up, guys? Welcome to the On Track with Annie podcast. This podcast is all about going after what you truly want in life. Today's guest is Dr. Jaime Zuckerman. She is a nationally known expert on narcissism. She is a narcissistic abuse relationship coach and licensed clinical psychologist. Dr. Z works with people nationwide, helping them to understand the complexities of narcissistic relationships, providing tools to navigate these dynamics, and offering customized behavior plans to help her clients make healthy choices and to get to where they want to be. This podcast is all about relationships, all about dealing with narcissistic people, and so much more. If you guys have been through this or you guys have encountered a narcissistic person, this episode's for you. It's a great listen, and I'm excited for you guys to get into this episode. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk today about this topic because I know it's a very popular one and it is very common. So we'll get right into it. Welcome to On Track with Annie. So the first thing I want to ask you is about your background and how you got started and what you do now.
Okay. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and I have a private practice outside of Philadelphia where we work with adults with depression, anxiety, relationship issues. And then I personally have a specialty in narcissistic abuse. So I work with people who are either currently in a narcissistic abusive relationship of any kind, significant other, family member, coworker, friend, help them kind of navigate that dynamic, help them get out of it, help them deal with it once they're out of it, because as we know, the abuse doesn't unfortunately stop once you're out of the relationship, and just kind of help people reclaim their sense of self after a relationship like that.
So we hear the term narcissist a lot, and I think people get confused by what it actually means. We hear a lot of things out there of what a narcissist is. So tell me, by definition, what is a narcissist and what are some signs to look out for?
So so there's narcissist and then narcissistic personality disorder. And I think what has happened over the last couple of years in particular, and with social media, there's pros and cons to it. But the downside is that people are lumping this term narcissist in areas that don't necessarily equate to narcissistic personality disorder. And they're very different things. So narcissistic personality disorder, somebody who is truly a narcissist, meets all the diagnostic criteria, is somebody who is, there's a couple kinds, but just kind of generally speaking, somebody who really lacks empathy, somebody who is grandiose, not only in their sense of self, but in the way that they think other people perceive them, their importance. They feel that they are entitled to things without having to work for them, or they're deserving of it. It doesn't really matter who's hurt in the process. They are extremely manipulative, very controlling. They are very reactive to criticism, even if it's constructive criticism. They take that as a personal attack. They have rage and anger issues. They are very good at, if they don't get what they want, they're very good at then kind of cutting the person off completely if they no longer serve a purpose for them. So they look at people as objects, not as people who have separate identities and beliefs and feelings. It doesn't matter to them, so to speak, because it doesn't interfere or affect their life in any way, shape, or form.
So do you think a narcissist can ever be changed? Or do you think that's how they are? There's no way to fix these people?
Yeah, I get yelled at for this all the time. But I think if you ask most mental health professionals, particularly those who have a pretty in-depth knowledge of narcissistic personality disorder, who have worked with people and worked with their significant others and family members, it is extremely rare that somebody with narcissistic personality disorder will change, or I should say, make any type of meaningful, sustainable changes. You may see change, but that change is likely with a motive. So for example, you may see them shift gears a little bit because they want to get something from you, or you may see them quote change for the better because they know that you're going to leave, and so they're trying to love bomb you to stay. Or for court, custody cases, we see this a lot in family courts. They put their best foot forward. So they may appear to change, but it's very unlikely that somebody with a true narcissistic personality disorder is going to have the willingness to change.
Do you think people like this can ever be in a healthy relationship?
I don't.
No. So
No.
let's say someone is, whether it's like you said, family members, and they're like, I love this person to death. Like they're a part of my life. I want them as part of my life. How can you have a relationship and communicate with them to where you're trying to make it somewhat healthy?
Yeah. So the only thing that you can do in the dynamic with somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder is for you yourself to set very clear and consistent boundaries with them. Now, that does not mean that they are going to follow those boundaries, and they probably won't. And they will push them and push them and push them to see how much they have access to your emotions, see how much they can still manipulate you, control you, get their needs met. Um, but it's not really, all people that'll come in my office and say, I set boundaries and it didn't work. Well, if the goal of setting the boundary is for them to change or to get it, I have people that'll say, like, I just want them to get it. They're not. They're actually dead set on purposely not getting it. So setting boundaries is more for yourself, and it's about how can you be in this and walk away with the least amount of anxiety and stress for yourself. Without the other person changing.
Why do you think people get so attached to narcissists? Is it because of the love bombing and they're kind of like recounting those times?
Yeah, so it's definitely that. There's the way that narcissistic behavior works, true narcissistic personality disorder. There's a very consistent blueprint across all narcissistic people. It's and the thing I think that is so, I hate saying interesting because it's such a heavy topic, but from my nerdy side, I will say I find this extremely interesting, that the similarities and that blueprint between narcissists, it doesn't matter who they are. The subtleties of their behaviors are identical. And it's amazing because if we think about depression and anxiety and all what we call axis 1 diagnoses, depression can look very different in me than it looks like in you. Anxiety, I could manifest it differently than you manifest it. But with narcissistic personalities sort of across the board, the behaviors, the motivations, they are almost identical and they're subtle. So one of the reasons why it's so difficult to kind of separate from or difficult to get out of and easy to stay in it is because one of the reasons, like you said, in the beginning stages of a relationship with a narcissist, it's very calculated. It's very purposeful. They're love bombing you, meaning they are doing everything they possibly can to get you, not just to fall for them, but for you to feel vulnerable with them, for you to let your guard down very, very quickly so that you're very forthcoming with your flaws that we all have, right? That you're very forthcoming in, oh, I grew up in an environment, my dad left at this age, and, my mom was an alcoholic, or, I didn't get along with my siblings, and, and I really feel that, our relationship was strained, and you really confide in them because they're saying to you, oh, you know what, Jamie, yeah, I went through the same exact thing. My dad did this and my mom did this. And they do it so that they can match your language and match your emotions. But the reason for that isn't to kind of join with you in this healthy way. It's to get you to feel that they get you on this deeper level, which is why in the beginning, it feels like a tidal wave. It's like this overwhelming sense of connectedness. And, I jokingly say this, but I'm not joking. If you hear somebody call you their soulmate in the first, I don't even, honestly, like 6 months, I kind of tell people, like, run, because on what are they basing that? Even if you're the loveliest person in the world, I know nothing about you. How could I possibly say you're my soulmate? So even though it feels really good, it's not real. And so what happens is once they have you and they store away these vulnerabilities to kind of use against you later, and they suck you in and you think they're amazing, then when they slowly start to withdraw that and slowly start to sprinkle in these conflicting messages and confusing messages and arguments, but they're so good and so sweet that it must be you because, maybe you misunderstood this. And so they do that, and then eventually that cycle of abuse starts to really kind of take root. Problem is that that person's always trying to get that love bombing person back. And so they hang in there longer, and they get these little sprinkles of love bombing here and there to kind of keep you in the loop, right? We call that kind of breadcrumbing or future faking, where they're making promises to you in the future. And it sets up what we call this intermittent reinforcement model in behavior therapy, where it's no different than the model of addiction, really, when you think about it. It's why gambling's so addictive, why drugs are so addictive. It's kind of this, you're craving this high, you get it, you calm down, right? Not really, but you feel like you're calming down and you're settled. And then you use again, or you gamble again, and you get that fix and you calm down. So it's these intermittent spurts of dopamine. And chemically speaking, forget psychologically and emotionally, but chemically speaking, it keeps somebody really stuck. And it's intentional. They know exactly what they're doing, and they'll do it with every person.
And I think it's confusing. Like, I was in a narcissistic relationship for a while, and it was confusing because I didn't know what signs to look out for. I was just kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe this person cares and loves about me so much, and they want to be with me forever and whatever. But then I would do the tiniest thing and they would yell at me and like bring me down. I would be happy and they would try to take that happiness away. If they didn't get what they wanted, or I wasn't with them 24/7, it was I'm in the wrong for having my own life or anything, because they didn't have control. And then they would flip it and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have done that. Bring you flowers. You know, the whole thing. And then you're in this confused state where you're like, oh, maybe I should have taken it differently. And it's just like, it's a cycle, like what you said. And
it's crazy making.
Terrifying.
It's
terrifying.
And people think this is one of the biggest misconceptions. And I'm so glad you said it was about control, because it's not about somebody falling hard for you and then falling out of love with you, right? It's not even, I don't mean to minimize toxic relationships, but it's different than a standard toxic relationship. It's different, because even in a toxic relationship, it doesn't mean the feelings are a facade. That doesn't mean that the person that you initially found isn't the same person they are now. You may just have very dysfunctional relational behaviors, which is different. And so when it comes to these narcissistic relationships, there's this big misconception that people who are weak, who are have very low self-esteem, who can't speak or think for themselves, who have, quote, attachment issues, are the ones that narcissists typically go for. And that's not accurate. What happens is narcissists routinely go for people who come off as very intelligent, very smart, attractive, driven, motivated, basically people that make them look good, right? Maybe they're in the limelight, they're wealthy, whatever the case may be. And then what happens is they're up here, let's say. And the reason why they go for people like that is because they love the supply they get from knocking that person down. And the further they can knock them down, the more supply it is for the narcissist. If they initially go for somebody who's very insecure, low self-esteem, there's not as much of a fall for them. It's not as much supply. And so at the end of a narcissistic relationship, when somebody gets out of that, then they appear to be broken, low self-esteem, having no idea what their sense of self is. And that's what people focus on. Oh, well, they must have had low self-esteem. That's why they went for this person. That's what happened as a result of the relationship. But that's not who they were in the beginning. And I haven't met one person who said they're the same person at the end of this than they are at the beginning.
It is crazy, because looking back at my experience, they try to tear you down so much to where you're like, I suck. Like, I'm not, like, I have so much to work on. And it's funny too, because like when I got out of that, I was like, I don't even know like what I like to do, who I am. And I would have people tell me, like, once I slowly got out of this, like, I'll call it depression, because it's crazy. Once you get out of that, you're just like completely, it's this mindset.
It's traumatizing.
I suck. Yeah. I would have people tell me like, I didn't know you were so positive and bubbly. And like, and I was like, I forgot that I was. Because I was in it for so long. So it's you completely lose who you are.
You lose who you are, and it's subtle. It's not like this happens overnight, and it's not like you're necessarily aware of it. Most people aren't even aware that this is happening. It's like a leaky faucet. I always say it's this drip, 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 and you don't really pay attention to it until you realize all of a sudden you're standing in your kitchen and there's water up to your knees, and you don't know how it got to this point, but now you're drowning. And nobody knows you're drowning because there's not water anywhere else outside. It's just in your house. And you don't want to tell anybody you're drowning because, well, didn't you see that the faucet was leaky? There's so much shame. There's so much guilt. You feel like it's your fault. And people don't even realize they're in it until either they hear somebody else's story, a survivor's story, and they're like, oh my God, that's my life. Or they hear somebody like me talking about it and they say, oh my God, wait, there's a name for that? That's what I went through. And so it's very jarring to hear that. And I give this example all the time because it still haunts me to this day. I had a patient who had been married for 20 plus years with a very abusive narcissist, had children, had a, was very bright, had a really good job before she got married. They got married. He wouldn't let her work anymore. She had, no financial backing, nothing. She hadn't worked in God knows how long. And when she got out of this finally, I remember her saying, similar to what you said and similar to what a lot of people say, I don't know who I am. I don't know what my interests are. I don't even know what food I like. I was told to eat this. I was told to cook this. I was told to watch this, wear this, think this way. You lose who you are. She said to me, and I, honest to God, will never forget this. It like hurt. It still hurts that so now she has her bed to herself, right? He's not there anymore. She didn't even know like how to go to bed. She didn't even know what side of the bed she wanted to sleep on. And she couldn't decide. And she was in agony over this. And to the outsiders, I will pick a side. And it's not about that. It showed just how little control and choice and a say she had in even the tiniest of decisions in her life. It was really just kind of eye-opening because it sounds silly, but it just shows you how really little control she had.
It's so true because you start to rely on them. Like I know for me, and I've had friends that have dealt with this too. Like I got out of it and I was like, I don't even know how to make my own decisions. Like I feel like I need that person to ask. And I was like, like any hard decisions, I would get so like stressed and anxious over, I could barely make a decision. And it lasted for months. I was like, I don't have this person to help me. When in reality, they shouldn't be telling you anything because they're just trying to bring you down and regardless.
That's
so
right.
Like,
and they believe, and that's, done through gaslighting, right? Where they make you think that your reality is just flat out wrong. And it is so scary because one, why would this, you don't even consider what this person's doing. And well, why would clearly like they wouldn't lie about something so like absurd, right? So clearly I'm misperceiving this because that's so like not what happened. And so you start to believe that your perception of reality, your perception of the people around you, your ability to trust them, your ability to do anything or perceive anything is faulty and can't be trusted. Almost like a cult, right? Like they lose the ability to think independently and they rely on somebody else to determine and perceive reality for them. And when you get into that habit for so long of depending on somebody else to define your reality because you don't think you're capable of it, it's impossible to make decisions afterwards because you don't trust anything about your judgment.
100%. So for people that are going through this, like how would you say they can rebuild themselves? Like how can they start to trust themselves and know who they are and know that they're amazing and they can make their own decisions?
Yeah. So first I tell people that it's going to be a very long process and that you're going to have days where you think you've got this and you're going to have days where you don't want to get out of bed, all of which is normal, appropriate, and part of the process. It doesn't mean you're taking, a step backwards. It's you're really rewiring your brain. And, you don't just rewire your brain overnight. You rewire your brain by practicing different behaviors, right? You rewire your brain by perceiving situations differently over and over and over again, right? Like tracks in the snow. You have to, if you do one, it snows again, the tracks disappear. But if you keep going and going and going over the same tracks over and over again, eventually they start to stick. It's no different. So you really are rewiring your brain. It's almost like this chemical detox you have to go. It's not just emotional. And I think that's what I really want people to understand. Your body, your physical self is completely out of whack. Your brain chemistry, your hormones, your nervous system is just shot. right? Your autoimmune system is shot. Everything is just out of whack. So it's this holistic approach that you really need to take. And I know people say like, oh, well, let me guess, sleep and eat healthy. Yes, that is such a huge part of it. You must go to therapy, and it really needs to be with somebody who is well versed in the nuances of narcissistic personality disorder and can prep you for any type of post separation abuse that's going to occur. Not saying, well, if they call you, be civil, just say, I'm fine, thanks, and just let it go. No, you need, no contact, assuming there's no kids involved, no contact, how you respond when they come back, because they will come back. And really somebody who knows how to empower you after this. And again, it's a slow process. It has changed you. But the best thing you can do, like I said, so find therapy with somebody who really gets it. You want to make sure that you have a support network, even if that support network is just one person, and really make sure that they are there for you, even if they don't get it, that they're there for you just to listen. You want to make sure that before, now I'm talking about intimate relationships, you want to make sure that before you leave, if you've been in a relationship with somebody for many years, that before you leave, you kind of have all your ducks in a row, whether that's having spoken to an attorney already, having money set aside if you don't have access to any accounts or anything, right? Borrow money, ask friends for money, or just slowly set aside even $20 a week, whatever you can do, because it's all of these things that give you a sense of empowerment. When you leave, there's a very high chance you'll go back. And I tell people all the time, that is not a step backwards. It's a process. Do not beat yourself up if you go back, assuming you're physically safe and you're not in harm's way. You want to make sure that if you go back, understand that every time you go back, it's one step closer to leaving for good. So I always tell people that, not to get discouraged.
Yeah. And I think the hard part too is like when people leave these relationships, they don't have a support system because this person has like taken all of their attention,
That's right.
all of their time.
That's right.
People that have an amazing family, like I was blessed with that, but I left and I was like, I haven't even told many people about this because I'm embarrassed. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. So I had like one friend that I could talk to, but it was very difficult when you don't have that. So what I did was I threw myself into like just any new experience, right?
Yeah.
Being around new people, and that really was helpful. But for people that don't have that, I can assume that that would be extremely, extremely tough.
Yeah.
So moving forward, do you think that these people getting out of this relationship have a hard time moving into new ones?
Yes and no. I think I see a couple things. I don't think it's a one size fits all approach for this. I think that some people will jump right into something else because they are, with good reason, petrified of being alone for all the things that we said. They don't know how to make their own decisions. They don't trust their judgment. They're not used to not having somebody there to kind of define their life and give them a narrative. So they may jump into something quickly, which is why therapy is so important, because if you're working with a therapist, that's something that they really will advise you not to do. And you can talk about the reasons why you're so inclined to jump into something else and talk about it before you actually do that, right? But then I also have people who are kind of the opposite, where they don't trust anybody. And I'll have people saying they've gone on a date, and the guy, or the girl, let's say I'll use a guy in this example. She asked the guy what he did for a living, and he told her, and they were talking about it for a while, and she's like, he's definitely a narcissist. He didn't even ask what I did for a living. And I had to remind her that she already had that conversation with him prior, while they were talking on the phone before they went out. So he already knew what she did, and so it's like they're overly vigilant and hyper vigilant of people being narcissists, and so they really don't trust anybody else. And so I typically, after any type of traumatic event or really difficult situation where you're locked in a very specific extreme pattern of behavior, when you come out of that, you really only have two options at that time, because your mind is so rigid. You either repeat or you go to the other extreme. And that's typically what I see when people get right out of it. And my goal is to kind of work with them towards the middle, where it's not one extreme or the other.
Okay, so moving forward and looking for green flags, let's go there. What are some green flags that people can look out for when they are getting into a new relationship? What are the things that are like, we need to focus on these few things?
Yes. So green flags, I actually just like to call normal behaviors. And I caution people, I don't know if I can curse on here, so I'll just
Yeah,
say,
you
but,
can. Yeah, you can.
okay. So what I tell people is when they get out of these relationships, and my best friend did this, and I still will say this to her, that you're so not used to healthy, normal relationship behavior, equitable relationship behavior, right? That when they do something normal and healthy, it's viewed as, oh my God, like, look, it's like giving them shit on a silver platter. That's what I call it. It's such basic, normal givens that the other person is looking at as like over the top. Oh my God, how amazing is this person?
It's like,
Right?
he brought
Like,
me flowers. He's love bombing. He's a
yes,
narcissist. It's
exactly,
like, no.
correct, exactly. Or like even, I uh, oh my God, he opened the door for me, and I'm like, and I mean that's unbelievable. I can't believe that's so nice. No one's ever done that for me, and and I'm kind of like, okay, but let's not give too, like, I guess that is, I don't, be careful giving too much credit for behaviors that are green.
Literally normal. I think
Literally
it's,
normal.
yeah, I think it's looking at it over time too, because some people, I was watching like an interview and it was like, this guy only had 8 weeks in him. 8 weeks, he showed you the best things, but then he fell off. He only had eight
Yeah.
weeks in him. So I think it's looking at it over time too. Like, is
Yes.
their level of investment increasing? Or are they
Exactly.
just, I don't know what to call it, love bombing, but
Exactly.
doing normal things and then they
Are
fall
they
off?
dropping off? Exactly. And
Yes.
it doesn't even have to be love bombing. They could have just lost interest,
Yeah.
or they're not love bombing. They really genuine, you see this a lot with people who have ADHD in the early stages of relationships. It really can sometimes look like love bombing because they're like so focused on you and so interested, but then it kind of just stops. It doesn't mean they're not interested in you, but that behavior, that intensity decreases. And so I have a lot of people say they're love bombing. You're like, well, that's not love bombing because the intention behind it isn't malicious. True love bombing, the intent behind it is extremely malicious. There's a motive behind it. So, but healthy green flag behaviors, are they asking questions about you? Do they genuinely care about what you do, what your interests are? Are they just asking because they're asking, or are they really paying attention and listening and incorporating it and applying it into their relationship with you? One of the things I really like that I think we look over a lot is, and this isn't a blanket statement, but how do they interact with their friends and their family? Right? Like, I'm not going to fault somebody for having a bad relationship with a family member because that happens to the best of us, right? And that doesn't mean anything about them. But is there a pattern in the way that they interact with everybody? Are they always the victim? Is everybody always an ass to them? Right? Are they always getting left out? Are they always in an argument with somebody? We always have that girlfriend that's like, no matter what, they're always arguing with everybody. And it's like always something. Like, is there that quality or is there not? So you really just want to look for, are they easy to get along with, right? Or do you have to work really hard? Are they interested in what your goals are? Are they interested in where you see the relationship going? Like, it's really a degree to which they take interest in you and how they apply it, but also how willing are they to let you take interest in them, right? Are they blocked off? Are they walled off? So all of these types of things. But again, my green flags may be different than your green flags, right? Based on our past experiences and what we want. So we also want to make sure we define them for ourselves. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's some that are global, but you want to pay attention to what your specific needs are too.
Right. Exactly. I guess it's like, are they meeting my needs? Do they make me feel good? Do they make me want to be better? And one thing that
Mm-hmm.
I look at now, I think, in dating is like, are they asking like the basic surface level questions, or are they interested in like diving deeper and getting kind
Yep.
of more intimate with what they're asking and
Mm-hmm.
communicating? And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
something that's really important that I see now. And then investing
Yep.
in like talking to the person and spending time with
Yes.
them and really going out of their
Yes.
way. So,
I agree.
um, yeah,
I agree. And I
amazing.
always say they should enhance someone, and this goes for friendships too, and your career and all of that stuff. Is it enhancing your life? Right? Like, is it making your life easier to live?
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're not going to be perfect. You're going to despise them at times. You're going to wish you never met them, but it's fleeting and it's temporary. We're human. We have bad days, right? But they have bad days. But overall, is this person somebody that brings out I don't even want to say the best in you, but brings out your willingness to be more flexible, brings out your willingness to compromise, brings out your willingness to want to try new things, just
Yeah.
typically enhance your life.
I could not agree more. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And where can they find you and everything that you have to offer?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram. I post a lot on there about this at Dr. Z Psychologist, and my website, drjamiezuckerman.com. And I have 2 workbooks on Amazon, Find Good Habits and Find Your Calm, which again, everything's on my website and on my Instagram page.
Perfect. I will put all the links in the description below.
Thank
And thank
you.
you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.